To welcome you all and thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Aubrey Lyons. I'm with the Montana World Affairs Council. And not only are we honored to have such a distinguished guest with us this evening, but delighted at such a great turnout, which I think really speaks to the interest in our community on global affairs, realizing that what happens around the world matters to us here in Montana. The Council, a little bit about the Council, we were founded in 2000 by former Ambassador and Great Falls native Ambassador Mark Johnson, who had a vision of bringing the world to Montana and Montana to the world. To date, the Council's organized more than 350 nonpartisan classroom and community education programs, community programs such as Council on the Radio, Business Luncheon Series, our Distinguished Speakers program like this evening's event. And the Council also strives to achieve his vision by engaging the next generation of global citizens through our education initiatives, which include the Montana Global Educator of the Year Award, our Academic World Quest competition, and our Council in the Classroom programs. Academic World Quest brings more than 250 high school students from around the state here to Missoula for a 2-day international education experience that completes with our competition, where the winning team is sent to Washington, D.C. to participate in the national competition. We're proud to report that Montana's World Quest teams are the 3rd largest in the country for the last 5 years. Included in that, geographically, probably the largest, because we've reached schools in all quarters of the state, from Denton to Westby, Gardner, and Wolf Point. Our Council in the Classroom program is our flagship distance learning initiative. This live interactive video conference connects global experts with Montana students around the state. This afternoon, Ambassador Baucus discussed China, North Korea, and the U.S. with students from Darby, Freud, Hayes, Lodgepole, Bozeman, and others. I'm confident he can attest to the value of this project, measured by some really tough questions he had to field from high school students. These programs would not be possible without the generous support of our donors and members. I'd like to especially thank the Dennis and Phyllis Washington Foundation, Allegiance, the Charles Engelhard Foundation, Milton Joan Ditstopoulos, Stockman's Bank, Northwestern Energy, Humanities Montana, Trails West Bank, Tim and Shelley Geisler, Charlie and Charlotte Oliver, and an outstanding board of directors and a group of student interns. We couldn't do it without you. I'd also like to thank Nancy Matthews and Katie Seidenschwartz, who hosted a lovely reception this evening. And on a final note, if you see the value in what we do in reaching students across the state and you enjoy our programs, I invite you to show your support and become a member this evening. And if you're not ready to join tonight and you need to sleep on it, you can feel free to visit our website where you can become a member or sign up for our events newsletter to stay apprised of upcoming programs. I'd also like to invite you to our next Distinguished Speakers program on November 16th with Ambassador Mark Johnson, our founder, who will be speaking on U.S. foreign policy, and this will happen at the Holiday Inn. We are also partnering with the Montana Artists Association, who's hosting an art auction November 16th through 18th to benefit the Council. I'd like to thank you again for joining us this evening. And I will now turn it over to our Council Board President, Mr. Charlie Oliver.
Well, thank you, and my thanks also for you joining us tonight, and welcome. It is a special, really a special evening. I think you're going to be more than informed after you hear the ambassador talk tonight. Before I get into the more formal introduction, I'd like to build just a bit on what Aubrey said at the end. We've done hundreds of these kind of programs. and they're world class, and they're on current global events, events of interest to all of us, and they don't just happen. It takes some effort, it takes some cost, and also on the education side. And today was a good example. The ambassador faced 6 high schools, live interactive video. He talked about China and North Korea, and then he got some powerful questions back. And it's good to see that enthusiasm, but we reach across the state, and that doesn't just happen. And by the way, we're the only council out of 90 plus in North America that has this one is unique to us. We dreamed it up. The rest of them love to have it, and they're welcome to it if they come and give us some money, which is where I'm going. Now, seriously, there's information in the back as to the different levels of membership to the Montana World Affairs Council. And if you relate to what we're doing tonight, please consider joining. We need your money. If you're a business or a corporation, I'm not too proud to say ask, consider sponsoring an event, World Quest, or if you have a foundation like the Washington Foundation, we'd welcome the opportunity to apply for a grant. We operate on an extremely lean budget. I say that, and we have really a tremendous staff. 2. We have a staff of 2 permanent employees. You just met half the staff, and that's Aubrey. And the other one is Lindsay in the back. She's our development officer. And in fact, I would like to give them a hand because they really work their hearts out. And then, in addition to that, I think Sheila Stearns, president of the University of Montana, is with us tonight. You around, Sheila? Oh, that's too bad. I'm thanking Sheila. We have 4 interns. I think we currently have 4. Is that right, Aubrey? That they don't get paid, and they come up there and they work their rear off, and they're really outstanding. And several of them are here. I'm going to point out one of them. One of them is Melody. That's 2 E's. Are you standing up? When you meet this young lady, she's petite and small, but man, she's powerful. She speaks multiple languages, and not the English. I mean, it's not like French and Spanish. I don't know whether it's Chinese, Japanese, or Arabic, but she speaks various languages, and she's self-taught. She's studying political science. Is that right? And we introduced her to Ambassador Baucus today, and the only other person I know, Melody with 2 E's, Max's wife. And I asked her, what do you want to do when you, I didn't mean it this way, but when you grow up. Melody, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean it that way, honey. And she looked right in Max's eyes and said, I want to be an ambassador, just like you. So my point is, folks, to all the points that Aubrey made, funding is critical to us. We have a very lean budget. We get a lot done with it, but we do need a certain amount of money. So please consider joining. And the memberships are very reasonable, and there's different levels. So whatever fits your fancy, if any of them. Having said that, let me get into really the real reason we're here, the main event. And, I'm going to introduce a person that, frankly, doesn't need much introduction here, I don't think. We've given, like I said, hundreds of these. We've had distinguished speakers from all over the world, but it's rare and seldom that we're able to have a person with such global experience on such an important topic that is a Montana sun. And I would venture to say I doubt if there's anybody in here that isn't aware of, knows of, or has not met Max Baucus. We're really honored to have him join us, and along with that, I want to recognize his wife, Melody, with 2 E's. And I also found out today who's the boss of that family. Before becoming ambassador, Ambassador Baucus has served our country 45 years or more. He started off serving in Montana at the House of Representatives. From there, he served in the U.S. House of Representatives, representing the state of Montana. He served nearly 4 decades in Senate, and then he was named ambassador back in 2014. He was the 3rd longest serving senator in the U.S. Senate and the longest serving senator from the state of Montana. He's just phenomenal what he's done as a statesman. He served on numerous committees throughout his career, particularly as senator, and I'm not going to get into all of them, too many to mention. But he is extremely well versed on tonight's subject. I had an opportunity to visit with the ambassador and his wife in Beijing a couple of years ago, and I and the group I was with, it was a national group of the World Affairs Council, were blown away with his knowledge of the issues between China and the U.S. But they were more blown away of his knowledge of the issues that drive China. And we don't always understand that, and he'll probably talk about that a little bit tonight. So with that, I'm really pleased to welcome Ambassador Baucus, Senator Ambassador Max.
Charlie Oliver, thank you, Charlie, very, very much. Charlotte, for all that you do, World Affairs Council. We're really lucky, blessed that you're taking such an active role. Before I go any further, I have to say how good it is to be in Missoula. I bumped into a few people tonight and said, "Oh, you knocked on our door several years ago. Don't you remember?" It was very formative. Back in those days, as you know, Missoula there were multi-member districts, not one legislative district, but multi-member. And so I knocked on doors throughout Missoula County, not just one legislative district, but 8 legislative districts. And it's wonderful. I learned so much, especially on the north side, talking to a lot of people who kind of shut in a little bit, senior citizens and real concerns they had. And I just cannot tell you how much that meant to me, is to be knocking on doors in Missoula. One little story, I was walking down Stevens, and I hear some people inside a house there. So I thought, well, it sounds like a few people there. So I knocked on the door. Silence. Well, I know somebody's in there because I heard them. So I knocked again. Silence. Well, doggone it, I know they're there. So I knocked again, and the door opened up a little bit, and I could smell the marijuana. So I walked in, I said, "Boy, it sure smells good in here." Well, they laughed. Lots of stories. It won't go on too long. And also, just thank you for all you do here in Missoula. My real inspiration in public service is Mike Mansfield. With the Mansfield Center here, the Mansfield Foundation, there's nobody like Mike. Teaching here is, such an inspiration in the Senate. I would see him on occasion when I was working in Washington, D.C., just to get to know him a little better. But I just want to thank all of you here in Missoula who are involved with the Mansfield Center, Mansfield Foundation. It is just, we're lucky that we have it here. I'm going to speak a little bit, pretty short. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, because this is your evening. I mean, this is our evening. I very much want to get into the questions that many of you have, or points you may have, so we can dialogue back and forth. And I urge you to think of it, maybe the most difficult or the most curious, whatever comes to mind that you think maybe you asked a little off key, maybe you want to do that. But just please do ask it, because that will be very helpful. Before I go further, I see Ray sitting in the front row, Ray Richo. I'm sorry to reminisce, I gotta stop this, but it's, I've known Ray for years, next to my wife Melody, the best chef ever existed. And I just want to just thank you, Ray, for all that you've done. Okay. We loved the job over there in China, Mel and I. I loved representing our state in the U.S. Senate. Can't be better. I mean, Montana, chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, most powerful committee, most everybody will admit that in the Senate. Trade, tax, healthcare, it was wonderful. I just loved it, and thank you all so very much for being the world's best employers, the best bosses I ever had. Thank you so much for being so terrific. But then the next job was even, I must say, even better. I decided not to run again after serving 6 terms in the Senate. It was the most difficult professional decision in my life. I'd done it, I liked it. It's getting a little ordinary in a certain sense. I knew how to raise money and run a committee and so forth. It was very tough. Should I run again, hopefully get reelected, or not? It was tough. And I decided, no, I want to jump out in the world and into the, beyond the Senate, beyond public service. Sink or swim. Make it or not make it. Be challenged. And I felt I would not have sufficient self-respect if I were to stay in the Senate and not jump in a whole new world. So I decided not to run again. And about 2 months later, President Obama called me up, and you'll love it. Is it a cat whiz game? It was halftime. And a person with us worked with me, said, Max, the president is on the line. And I said, wait a minute, I saw President Crosado earlier today. What do you mean, I don't need to talk to the president again? No, the president. And the cell service wasn't very good. And so went out about a mile or 2 away from the stadium, and Mel and I, and the lady working for, we were all listening, and President Obama asked if I want to do this, and I didn't give, in a nanosecond, I just absolutely, it sounded just so terrific and so much fun. We jumped into the job, and Mel especially jumped into it, literally. When you're over there, they give you a car. I got a car, but not Mel, she doesn't get a car. And in fact, when you're a spouse of ambassador, it's kind of tough, to be honest. It's you're just not really the person that the State Department and all the other agencies pay a lot of attention to. And so we bought a car, and Mel got a driver's license. And on the driver's license, she came home and looked to talk to our staff, said, looking for a name on the driver's license. Where's my name on the driver's license? It took it to a person in the residence who speaks perfect Chinese. And he laughed and says, where it says name, your name's not there, Mel. Where it says name, you are wife of Max Baucus. Well, it was so fascinating because the people, it's infectious, that's contagious. The energy, the Chinese people, practical, pragmatic, want to get things done, results-oriented, competitive, almost survivalist. They've been through the Cultural Revolution, the Great Leap Forward, been through a lot. And boy, they know the meaning of hard work in order to survive, to get a job, and to really get ahead. Sometimes it's a bit mistaken because you'll stand in line there and people push you aside. You get off an airplane or bus or subway or something. They just push you aside. They're not being rude. They're just doing what they can to ensure that they get ahead. That's the way it is, and you got to accept that. They're not being rude at all. That's just the way it is. And you just got to deal with it, work with it. And we loved it. I'm going to make a couple of 3 points, and I'm going to stop. One, before I went over, someone suggested I read a book by Henry Kissinger on China. He wrote about 5 or 6, 7 years ago. It is an excellent book. For all of you who really care about the subject, I highly recommend it. He makes a couple of points there which I found very much to be true. The first is it's Weiqi. Weiqi is a Chinese board game. It's like Go. It's an Asian Chinese board game. And Kissinger points out that in the West, we tend to play chess. And in chess, there's an absolute winner, absolute loser, unless there's a stalemate. Not so in Weiqi or Go. Rather, in those games, they're longer term, they're more strategic, and you position your players in a way so that the outcome is inevitable, that you're going to win. You don't need to fight the battle. It's foregone conclusion already. It's just longer terms, more strategic, takes time. And it's a step at a time. It's like salami slicing. A little bit here, a little bit there. And that's exactly what I found to be the case over there, especially in the South China Sea. You recall that a couple, 3 years ago, the Chinese would start dumping sand on reefs in the South China Sea. And they said, oh no, don't worry about that. We were worried, but we did not do much about it as a country. And pretty soon those features became islands. They built up islands for commercial as well as military purposes. And there are a bunch of them out there. And even though they're illegal by international law standards, the Court of Arbitration over in the Netherlands ruled unanimously that they violate UNCLOS, which is the United Nations Law of the Sea. China didn't care. They says, so what? Those are ours. We just built them. But it's one step at a time. It's building those islands, and the whole theory being it's a little bit of here, a little bit of sand on this island, a little bit more on the next island, not enough to get people too upset, then a little bit more, a little bit more, a little more, then pretty soon it's a as they say in French, it's a fait accompli. It's all done. And that's really a way they do things. It's just a step at a time. Another point in the Kissinger book I thought was very, very true, and I was kind of, if not a Bible role model for me over there. He talks about the Greek historian Thucydides, and talks about the so-called Thucydides trap. That is, what happens in history when a rising power meets an established power. And it began with Athens and Sparta, rising, established, war. And about 14, 16 times in history that's happened, and most of the time it hasn't turned out too well. It's been a conflict. And most riveting to me is a passage in this book. It's about a British Foreign Service officer named Crowe. Crowe was tasked in 1907 by the British Foreign Service to write a paper on Germany. What are Germany's intentions? What's going to be Germany's role in Europe? So Crowe did a little paper, came back and said, what Germany says is totally irrelevant. Germany can say they're the most peace-loving, cooperative, wonderful country in Europe. It doesn't matter. It's all irrelevant. So what is relevant? Crowe concluded a couple things. One, look at Germany's size. Germany is such a large country in Europe. Second, it's a military power. They're growing, developing their military. Those two facts combined will dictate Germany's future in European future. And that's what happened. So then Kissinger asked the question, how does that apply to China? China's a growing, rising power, second largest country in the world. We're the established power. What's going to happen? Rising China, established U.S. He does not answer it. He just asks the question. And it basically is a question I constantly ask myself, and I think more importantly, I would ask the Chinese and also ask our American government. You know, I'm Montanan. We Montanans are a little bit, we like to be candid, to the point. Don't like to beat around the bush and so forth. When I arrived over there, it's my job to represent the United States at lots of different forums, lots of different places. And one of them was, hi, how are you? That's okay. That's okay, I'll make it. And so you go to a meeting, I was sitting across the table from a pretty high government official, and a Chinese general, and he'd be reading his talking points. It's very formal, just reading his talking points. And my crack staff would give me my talking points to read. I read them. It was a waste of time. Now, on one hand, each side was reaffirming each government's position, but there's no interchange, there's no dialogue, none. And that's pretty much the way it is in the state, in the State Department and in these meetings. So I took it upon myself, this is nuts. So about the third month there, the Chinese general was going, or whoever, it was a Chinese general, going through his talking points. I just interrupted. I forced myself to be rude. Interrupt mid-sentence, but interrupt in a constructive, positive way. Not personal, not negative, not an embarrassing way, but ask a constructive question like, could you give me an example of that, please? Or could you explain that a little more fully? And you know, they liked it. And I have found that the more I did that, the more I got more respect than otherwise would have received. It's human nature. You got to respect people. One way to respect people is just ask them stuff on a positive basis, not just a negative basis. And I had to train, that's not too strong a phrase, U.S. government officials when they came to China to interrupt, ask questions. Don't be, we Americans like to think we're really polite. We don't want to embarrass the host country. Come on. Yet they like the candor. There are a bunch of cream of the crop U.S. military over there. Remember at 40, 50, the brigadier generals and captains and so forth. And I primed them to do this and ask questions. And then they did. And afterwards, I walked up to the host as a Chinese admiral. I said, geez, I hope our people weren't so tough on you. Oh, I loved it. They were great. And I just urge us to do more and more of that. Same thing with the private sector. American companies that come over, and they too would be a little nice. Is the way you got to ask questions. You got to get into it. So I found by doing that and asking that basic Thucydides trap question, I got their attention, and I think I got a little of their respect. And I'd say, you got to not just tell us what your intentions are. Look at your GDP is about 7% annual growth a year. That doubles in 10 years. Pretty soon your economy is going to exceed that of the United States. You're building up your military. What are we to think, we Westerners, we Americans? What are your intentions? I don't care, and you have to show them by deeds, not just words, but by deeds. And look what you're doing in the South China Sea. Those are deeds. That's not looking too good. And they would, every time I asked that question, they just listen. They wouldn't respond. I got one response once from a person who was a Chinese ambassador to the United States, and a good friend, liked him a lot. And he said, well, we're thinking about it, but he really couldn't say more. But that's the question I think has to be in all of our minds as we work with China. It's not just what's our China's intentions, where's China going, but what are we going to do about it? And what's our goal? What's our strategy in pursuing all this? Another conversation I'd like to talk about, mention anyway. In November 2014, President Obama came over for a summit with President Xi. And it's some of the usual. And again, in these summits, each president would speak maybe 10 minutes, and the next president would speak 10 minutes. And then neither would ask questions of the other. It was kind of statements. And they were somewhat thoughtful, but I kept urging a change in format so there'd be a little more Q&A, get to talk to each other a little more. You read about these little walks on the side afterwards. They don't amount to much. It's pretty It's not much. Anyway, at this meeting, the first summit, 2014, November, you could tell President Xi was a little agitated about Hong Kong. He twice raised the point, what are you Americans doing down there in Hong Kong? Concerned that you're fomenting unrest down there in Hong Kong. You could tell it was under his skin. And President Obama said, well, look, you got to remember, we're Americans. That human rights is in our DNA. So a member of Congress stands up on behalf of human rights, say in Hong Kong. It's part of our DNA. It's in our Constitution. It's our Declaration of Independence. It's who we are as Americans. And he said it's also a little bit my DNA, President Obama. You know, it's human rights is important to us. It's human dignity. It's who we are as Americans. Well, then President Xi said, well, he started talking about the role of the party, the Communist Party. And he is turning out to be more true than I even realized back then. He started talking about the emperor in China takes care of the people. For thousands of years, the emperor always took care of the people. And he's kind of trying not to say he's the emperor, but you could tell that was a little bit back in his mind. And he also said, the party is everything. The role of the party is to take care of the people. The role of the party is to do whatever it takes to care of people, and it trumps human rights. Human rights is not that relevant as long as the people are taken care of. What does that mean? That means income's rising. Now, a little more attention to air pollution, water pollution, healthcare, it's just to take care of the people. In order to, he didn't say this, but this is what it is, to maintain that Faustian bargain. The Faustian bargain basically being, as you know, Chinese people, if their incomes are going up, pollution's being addressed, etc., they're okay. They will not question the legitimacy of the party. That's the deal. And the party will do almost anything to maintain control to make sure that that bargain is upheld. And the way they uphold it is to do what they can to help take care of the people. You may have noticed in the news the last couple of days that China spent a lot more time addressing air and water pollution. And it's happening in part because people have a little more income, a little more money, they start thinking more about all this than before. He's very clever about all this. Essentially, I see a very determined China. Chinese think long term. They're putting together this huge, big infrastructure project called OBOR, One Belt, One Road, trillions of dollars, building up infrastructure, ports, railroads across Asia, over to East Asia, Central Asia, and it's part of the long-term vision. It's Xi Jinping's vision, which he announced several years ago. I think it's very smart. It's strategic. You know what it is. It's not too abstract. It's roads and bridges and so forth. And they got a lot of money, as you know, but close to $4 trillion in foreign exchange reserves, and they can spend a lot of money here. China is also working a lot worldwide. The Chinese foreign aid is equal to that of the United States around the world. In South America, Africa. I was talking to somebody earlier here about Mexican and Chinese aid in Mexico. Now, of course, things get complex. Mexico's worried about NAFTA, and so they're hedging their bets a little bit with China and other countries if NAFTA goes down the tubes. But it's just they're very, very clever in doing so. They've also taken advantage of a couple of developments. One is the Eric Snowden revelations. When Snowden mentioned, hey, here the United States is engaged in all this espionage. Oh, the Chinese, this is a great opportunity for the Chinese. And that's what they do. Earlier, when I was talking to one guy named Lu Wei, he's been deposed, he's head of cybersecurity in China. And I was trying to get him to at least admit conceptually there's a difference between spying for national security purposes and spying for commercial purposes. No, there's no difference. It's all the same. And I tried, 2 hours and 15 minutes. Anyway, we Americans we kind of had enough. when it's clear that the Chinese were hacking officer personnel here in the United States, and we had the goods on them, and we started to sanction a couple of people. And man, oh man, there's a guy named Meng Jianju. He's a top party guy for security. President Xi twice talked to him. Meng, hightailed it to Washington to try to put together some kind of agreement. Just before President Xi's next visit to Washington, they do not like to be embarrassed. And anyway, we hammered out a 5-point cyber deal. And one of the points is that they do recognize the difference between spying for security purposes and spying for commercial purposes. And we're making a little bit of progress there. Not a lot, a little bit. Also, the Chinese were pretty clever on climate change. When I arrived, I talked to them a lot about climate change, the importance of climate change. I got nowhere. It's like talking to a fence post. I mean, just nowhere. And President Obama would talk to him, Secretary Kerry, others. We just wouldn't get anywhere. And after a while, I saw a glimmer of interest among the Chinese, but within about a year. And partly it's because we were talking so much, the United States was, to the Chinese about the importance of addressing global warming. But they saw some advantages here. Number one, their president could be on the world stage with the American president. That gave them status and prestige. And we hammered out this agreement, the two countries, and they're pretty, President Xi's not too dumb. There's an opportunity here. Second, enable the reformers, and the government really tend to be reformers, to push back against the non-reformers in China. By non-reformers, I mean those who want to keep the status quo, the state-owned enterprises, maintain the cozy relationships, it's called the Guangxi, that exist. But by agreeing to address climate change, President Xi and the government could say, hey, we got to do this, because if we signed up this thing, it's something they have to do. But third, I think even more importantly, they saw an economic advantage. Develop renewable energy technologies and develop them with a vengeance so that they could sell them overseas, and that's what they're doing. Flooding the U.S. with solar panels, with wind power, subsidized, and blocking Americans over there. It's very mercantilistic, and it's really very good. Now, when Snowden came out, the opportunity they saw there was this. Hey, we can pass all these national security statutes protecting our Chinese national security. And hey, by the way, we can use these to block foreign technology companies from coming into China. It's on the basis of national security, and that's what they've done. One example is very vivid. A couple of years ago, the government came up with some so-called banking guidelines saying that all Chinese banks within a couple of years had to have 70% local content. That meant that all of the routers, the servers, and all the technology that goes into up-to-date modern banks had to be Chinese. 70% had to be Chinese within a couple of years. Second, all technology companies that gave technology to banks, sold it to banks, would have to turn over their source code for all their software. Next, software that is called backdoor technologies that are secure and controllable, and data localization is anathema to American companies. We just could not do it, and we would not do it. And but China tends to stick with something. They tend to prevail against American companies, largely because China is such a huge market. American companies feel they gotta do business in China. It's such a huge market. And if we don't, we lose out. And so the Chinese know that, take advantage of it, and start to force American companies to back off a little bit, to compromise here and there, to transfer some technologies a little here and there, and just do deals. China's are very good at dividing and conquering, one company off against another. I'm not being critical, I'm just saying that's the way it is. And it's something we have to recognize and deal with. I'll kind of close with a couple points here. I really want to get to your questions. I think the 19th Party Congress, which is ongoing now, is a major, major event. It's consolidating party power, where President Xi is the man. And it enables him to go ahead and the government with whatever policies they want to pursue without worrying very much anymore about internal discord. It's a seminal event, I think. And as you probably have read, Xi's thought, which is socialism with Chinese characteristics, is now placed in the Chinese Constitution. That's extremely telling for me, because that means that nobody can now question President Xi personally on any policy, because if one were to do so, he or she would be questioning the party, the Constitution. It's in the Constitution, and that's virtually treason. He has consolidated so much, and I think China is going to pursue its vision. I think that they want in 30 years from now be the preeminent global player. About 30 years. That's basically, I think, the plan. Meantime, we Americans are aiding and abetting it. With our isolationism. When we pull the plug on the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, huge mistake. When I was there, the most important geopolitical matter to cross my desk, I thought, was that, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, because it would enable the United States to be present in Asia, work with other countries, be present, and withdrawing create a big void which China is now filling up. And they're doing it, very big smile on their face when we pulled the plug. Second, withdrawing Iran, withdrawing the Paris Accord, UNESCO. China sees that. They see an opportunity for them to gain an advantage. I think it's quite troubling. I guess the final point is, there are opportunities for us with China, and one is North Korea. What in the world's going to happen in North Korea? My view, just cutting to the quick, is this. The horse is virtually out of the barn. Kim Jong-un basically is a nuclear power, pretty close to it. And he's developing missile capability. And everything we've done, US, China, other countries, really hasn't made much difference. He's so determined, Kim is, to build that capabilities, raise his profile, gives him leverage, so that he can then work with other countries. And don't forget, other countries have nuclear capability. You got Pakistan, India, China, Russia, you know. But so if he does develop this, and I think he's pretty close to getting it, then it's up to the rest of us to say to Kim, okay, you've won. We're not going to pursue regime change. We're not going to try to topple you. You're there. But here's the deal. In the nuclear club, this is we kind of work things out, and you keep working with us, and we'll find a way to develop economic agreements, the kinds of things that are important to you. And he will still be in power. He'll still have the bomb, and but then I think if he's assured there's no regime change, that he'll maybe be willing to work with us. China can play a big role here. I think there's no solution to the Kim Jong-un problem without including China. If we were to go in preemptively, United States, causing instability in the peninsula, China would march right in. China does not want an unstable peninsula. China does not want a peninsula that's under the U.S. control or South Korean auspices. They want it under Chinese control. And they're willing right now, I think, to bide their time. It's the lesser of many evils. Right now, it's the status quo, trying to figure things out, while we Americans are kind of fumbling and not really doing, frankly, a very good job. So, and cyber is another area where we can cooperate. It's a huge problem in the world, cyber warfare, cyberspace. And we're going to do better the more we Americans get our act together as a country and project strength the right way, not just military, but it's economic strength. I'm reminded a little bit of a book influenced me a long time ago by Paul Kennedy. It's called The Rise and Fall of Nations, basically, pointing out that in the sweep of history, countries, civilizations rise and fall. Greeks, Romans, Egyptians, we're a pretty young country. There's no guarantee the U.S. is going to continue to rise. No guarantee. We're about 230, 240 years old, only. And so what it really comes back to that Pogo cartoon, you know, I've met the enemy and he is us. We've got to take care of get our act together in the deepest sense of the term. And I have great faith in our country. We're resilient. And my view is we're going through a stage right now, which is not good. But we're a resilient country, and it's up to us, though. It's up to the people. We're a democracy. It's up to all of you. It's up to all of us to kind of ratchet things up in a positive way, get a little more involved than we have been in the past. So I spoke longer than I thought I would, so thanks a lot. Let's start.
Do the Chinese have any intention of doing anything to rein in North Korea?
I think China would like to rein in North Korea if it could. It can. But if it were to isolate North Korea, cut off all the oil that China ships to North Korea, 70% of North Korea's oil is from China, that China then runs the risk of instability in the peninsula, chaos, and that happens, then the United States will get more involved, as will South Korea, and they're willing now to bide their time and not go in and cut off all that oil that they could cut off, because the consequences of that, they think is worse than letting Kim proceed. Yeah.
In coming to just kind of tacitly accept North Korea as a nuclear power, you said earlier that we could come to expect them to work with us, and I was hoping that you could clarify your meaning on what it is you think we could obtain from cooperative relationships with North Korea after accepting them as a nuclear power.
Well, this is just an idea that came to me really the last 3 days, just watching what's going on. One is we can get them to, maybe, try to get them to join the Non-Proliferation Treaty, for example, the space treaty, and so forth, in exchange for more economic assistance to the country. But my premise here is that he's still going to be a nuclear power, and that's going to be the whole card. He's going to have to play if he wants to play it. Some people think he's a nutcase. I don't. I think he's quite rational. He's pretty tough, but he's rational. I think he kind of knows where the line is that he can't cross. He talked a bit about shooting missiles down to Guam. That's crossing the line. You can't do that. And you don't hear as much from him now. It's why I'm not sure. But I think he knows that there is a line. I think he kind of knows where it is that he cannot cross. Otherwise, provoke the United States into taking military action. I think military action would be devastating to the peninsula. It is at all costs we can to avoid. Yeah.
Thank you, Ambassador Baucus, for addressing us. In your last statement, you said that we can be a part of the solution, and I'd like to hear what your action is for that. I know as far as campaigning for candidates, that's very important, but what besides that? I'm a mother, a grandmother, a wife, a community member, and I'd really like to make a difference. So how can we do that as a community?
Well, it's an excellent question. It's getting involved in all the organizations you belong to, organizing, and talking to our delegation. Can't talk to others very directly because Steve Daines and John Tester care much more about you than they do about people from California, and vice versa. But you have leverage there. Look at it this way. What's our population, Montana? About 1 million. What's the population of the state of California? About 40 million. You have 40 times more power than a Californian in talking to the United States Senator. 40 times. Just think of it. You are a powerful person. And it's also because we're lucky. We're really one big small town, Montana. And we kind of know each other and talk to each other. And so when you call John Tester and Steve Daines and the other guy over in the house, at first they won't take your calls. Oh, he's busy. Sorry. Leave a message. No, you say, he works for me. And I, be polite, but insistent. And just say, I expect a call back. Mm-hmm. You're not going to get a call back. Then next week you call again. Then the third week, oh my gosh, she's called 3 times now. Maybe you better do something about this. I've seen in the United States, I've seen a Montana senator turned around based on calls from home. And is again, I know it's not that hard to make a telephone call, really. You got to kind of, it is a little bit difficult, actually. You got to get out of your routine. But you got to ask yourself, what's more important, that telephone call or something else you're doing that week? It's up to the people. I know it's corny. I'm sorry. Let me say this to you. I think it's kind of instructive here. Maybe it's kind of. The Chinese think their socialism with Chinese characteristics is superior to ours. I remember talking to a state councilor, this young teacher. He's a top foreign policy guy in China. He explained to me, he said, no, our socialism, it is so superior to your democracy. We are the role model for developing countries, not democracies. Look how far we've come in China the last 30 years. How much our country's grown and developed. Never could have happened in a democracy. No way. Impossible. And he's probably right, frankly. But it's not to say it's the right thing to do, but he's probably right in terms of development. And they think their selection process for their leaders is far superior to ours, because their leadership has been tested, it's peer reviewed. They've been through all these different stages, and so the party kind of knows who they can trust and not trust, who's smart and who's not smart, who's got the experience and who doesn't, and so forth. And they say that, you Americans, your democracy, anybody can get elected. My only point here is, this is serious stuff, and they feel very strongly about it. And I guess to another point, which is just my personal view, I may be wrong. During the time I was there, a lot of folks in our embassy, and by the way, I want to take my hat off to our Foreign Service officers. They are just wonderful. They're really smart. When I was representing Montana in the Senate, we were lucky, blessed with great staff. I think we had some of the best staff in Washington. I thought, well, gosh, get over to China, I'm not going to have the great staff. They're wonderful. They're really, really good. They're really terrific. But so the point is this, that we in the embassy, and I was a bit guilty, I was pretty guilty, more we interact with the Chinese at all levels to influence them, and that is very important, to influence them at all levels. It's from presidential, student exchanges, and we have 50 different departments and agencies in the building, not just the State Department, but it's energy, Justice Department, all those representatives are in the embassy working with their counterparts. There's a bit of a feeling, I think, an assumption, but if we keep interacting, because we're superior, we Americans, it's an exceptionalism that we Americans have, they're going to be more like us. Just keep working with them and they're going to be more like us. I've begun to question that assumption, because China is China. The U.S. is the U.S. We've got our independent judiciary, rule of law, constitutional bill of rights, free press, etc. They don't. It's one party rule. It's socialism, Chinese characteristics, and they think it's superior. That is, the government does, the party does. And the people so far are willing to kind of go along with it. So I guess I'm saying that when we deal with China, whether it's China per se or with North Korea, I think we have to recognize we're no better than they are. They're no better than we are. They are who they are, and accept it. And it's mutual self-respect. And we have to, as a country, develop our longer-term strategy. We're way too ad hoc, way too ad hoc. Our longer-term strategy with respect to China, know where our bottom line is, know what we can agree with and we can't agree with, and and follow through with that. I think that's very, very important. So you can make a difference. Yeah.
Mr. Ambassador, there was an article in one of the magazines about 2 months ago in which a very experienced reporter went to North Korea and had extensive conversations at various levels there. And his conclusion was that the communication between the two countries now is very poor, that they really do not understand each other and are instead passing in the dark, and that increases the risk. What is your view of that?
I agree with that. I very much agree. Our communication can be improved between the United States and China too, frankly. I think we Americans haven't spent enough time thinking about working on China. It's been said many times, and I think it's true, that the most important bilateral relationship in the world is U.S.-China. And because it's a rising power established, it's going to in many ways influence standard of living for our kids and grandkids. If we get it right, or get it pretty much right, it'll be better than if we don't. Korea is just impossible. I would ask our embassy very often, what's going on in Korea? Over and over again. I didn't get much of anything, frankly. I think that was a Nicholas Kristof article. Yeah, and I think he's right. Yeah.
Given that we understand what China's security interests are in their northwest territories, and the fact that they do not want a U.S.-led government or a South Korean pro-Western government on their borders, why do we continue to insist that China has the motivation to assist us in solving the North Korea problem?
Well, it's in our mutual self-interest. Mutual. China wants to solve it too, as do we.
But we continue to insist that China needs to do more.
We do. I think that's naive.
Thank you.
Yep. But we don't have a better alternative. And I think we need to find one, and I'm suggesting, maybe I'm getting too far ahead of the game here, that basically, Kim's got the bomb, got missiles, and it's a little bit foolish and late, frankly.
30 years.
Well, it's true. When I was there, I don't be critical of anybody, but I mean, this is probably true in the Bush administration as well, but my gosh, I was tasked with talking to the Chinese government about North Korea, and when President Obama came over and Secretary Kerry, it's kind of embarrassing, frankly. We just be checking the box. We did not have a good, solid plan talking to China, how to urge China to, in a real sense, do more. Rather, we just saying, China, do more, do more, do more. And to some degree, we Americans, I think, are too much the demandeurs. We're always asking China, do this, do that, do this, do that. Rather than coming up, okay, and here's an idea, here's a plan, how we can work this out together, the two of them. And it goes back to my earlier point, we're different, but we have to deal with each other. It's so important. Already we work together pretty well. We're pretty much joined to the hip economically. There's so much trade between our two countries. We need each other, but China needs us, frankly, more than we need them. And that's a card we have not played very well. Yeah.
I was just wondering, okay, so you kind of talked about they're building the islands in the South
Right.
China Sea. What do you think their intentions are, and what do you think our appropriate reaction would be?
Well, they want to project power by building those islands, militarizing them, and so they can project power in the South China Sea. Why do they want to project power? One is protect the sea lanes, because a lot of oil comes in from around the world through the Malacca Straits and up that part of the world into China. But that's also why the Chinese are building this one belt, one road. option. So that, hedge their bets and protect themselves. I don't think China, and also it enables China to project a little power and put a little more pressure on the Southeast Asian countries, the Philippines and Vietnam and so forth. It's that's power if you're on those islands. It's I think that's what's happening. Yeah.
Well, it's a projection of power, but do we just acquiesce that they violate international law in the South China Sea?
Virtually.
Do you speak for your generation?
I think it's sort of, I hate to say it, kind of realpolitik. It's what it is. What are we going to do? Send bombers over there and blow them off the islands? They will retaliate big time. It's happened. And as I tried to explain earlier, it's very clever. Wei Chi, salami slicing, a little bit of time, a little bit of time, a little bit of time. And there they are. It's already done.
Blackmail pays.
They're very clever about it. Again, I don't want to be critical of anybody, or even of the Obama administration, my boss. But we are very ad hoc, we Americans. And we're so involved in so many different parts of the world. We react too much to this event, that event, this part of the world, that part of the world, without developing a longer-term strategy that's sustainable, sustained with in this case, China. I was part of many National Security Council meetings. What did we do? I'd attend at 3 in the morning. It'd be 3 in the afternoon in Washington, and top folks around the table. What do we do about this? What do we do about that? And we did not have a longer-term strategy. We were just reacting to this and that. Different agencies have different, as they say, equities. Military want to do this. State Department said, no, we're trying to do something else with China. They might not like it, and so on and so forth. We did, though, in a couple instances, I think, act appropriately in standing up to China. This is before one of the summits. President Xi's coming over, and I was at a Defense Department meeting, Secretary Ash Carter there, and a bunch of folks around the table. And afterwards, I walked up to him, Secretary Carter, and I said, I just got to kind of exercise about this. President Obama, look President Xi straight in the eye at a small meeting as possible and say, no more. The no more here was applying to something called Scarborough Shoal and Second Thomas Reefs. And I said, he should say to President Xi, you go to Scarborough Shoal, you're going to rue the day he did this, because there'd be immense repercussions. I'm not telling you what it's going to be, but there'll be immense repercussions. Carter looked at me and said, oh, that's a great idea. Let's do that. They probably thought of it already. I don't know. But the main point is, he did that. President Obama did that. And they stopped. They did not go to Scarborough Shoal. We called them on it. And that's really what we have to do. That is, develop our strategy, what makes sense. Of course, be modified now and then. But know where our bottom line is. And we can convey that privately to the Chinese. Say, and game it out, knowing if we enforce it, they'll retaliate some way. That's all going to be all thought out and gamed out. What do we do? They got to see that we mean what we say. We haven't done, in my judgment, enough of that. I've found many times in the embassy, working with Chinese on this issue or that issue, if you stand up to them, they back down. But you got to stand up. And that's what we have to do here, too. We didn't in the South China Sea because we didn't have a real plan. Could let it happen. I remember back then Kissinger once said publicly, you think American public going to stand for protecting those islands out there? He was kind of right. I'm not sure the American public would at that time. But anyway, we need a plan. They got a plan. We need a plan. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
You've already
you've already told us what China's intention is, and that is to be the lone superpower in 30 years. So I don't understand how we can turn around then and say that we're working for our mutual best interests. And I am not comfortable with North Korea having nuclear capabilities for a number of reasons. Let's face it, they hate us. Who's not to say that they're not going to give that technology to rogue regimes that are also working against us. They're already working with the Iranians.
That's a big issue, I grant you. But the question is, what's the alternative? Right now, diplomacy is not working. Maybe we are pushing our country, backdoor diplomacy, third-party talks, and just trying to figure out something. So far, there's no give, at least I'm aware of. But let's assume that the continued diplomacy and continued sanctions does not work. And so far, it's not worked very well. So what's the alternative to that? Some say preemptive military action. And I'm not sure that's too good. So what's the alternative to that, if that's ruled out? I logically then come to the conclusion I came to. I don't like it at all. It's the worst, it's the least worst of lots of bad alternatives. You're right. I'm sure we're gaming this out. We better be. Kim might say, okay, we'll sell technology to Iran. He'll sell technology to whomever. And therefore, part of the solution is to do what we can to stop that and get him to sign the non-proliferation regime, if he can. You're right, same time, other problems arise. Japan's going to want to develop the bomb, as will South Korea. And things get pretty tense. I'm hopeful that when President Trump visits the area, he's going to be there in a couple of weeks, 3 weeks, that I'm talking to Tokyo, to Seoul, and he'll be in Beijing. They could hopefully get a little conversation going here to try to figure out what to do. I'm not at all comfortable with Kim Jong-un proceeding. He's almost there already. But what's the alternative? And you got to deal with alternatives in life. And that's the best. I don't like it. But among those that I can think of, there are smarter people than I thinking about this. But as I look at it and think about it and watch all this, I just think that's where we are. Yeah.
Do you think the Chinese still harbor some resentment from the treatment that the West gave them 100, 200 years ago?
Yes, big time.
You
Big
think
time.
that's a motivating factor for them?
I think it's part of it. You know, look, China has been the center of the universe for centuries, for eons. In fact, when does Chinese history begin? It often goes back to BC, about the time of Christ. But then China, the emperors existed way, way before that. There's really no beginning. It's just that China had been there so long. And all the emperors and all the regimes. And they're the center of the universe. The Middle Kingdom is the center of the universe. Countries that come and pay tribute, not to trade or do deals, but to come and pay tribute, kowtow, to give a gift, pay tribute to the emperor, the center of the universe. Then the last 2 centuries, Opium Wars, and the Brits came in, and World War I, World War II, and so forth, and the Chinese were put upon by Westerners, by the Japanese, and just humiliated. But now that they've come back, big yo-yos here. In 1840, China had 32% of the world's GDP. 32%. The U.S. is about 2% before the Industrial Revolution started to kick in. And now it's switched around. We're up by far, but obviously their economy is number 2 in the world. And they're going to surpass the size of our economy in about 20 years, roughly. So yes, there's a lot of humiliation, a lot of, what goes around comes around a little bit. That's part of what's giving them a bounce in their step, a bit of hubris here, no question. That's a part of it.
Can you comment on the imbalance of trade and what you think the strategy should be?
Imbalance of trade, yeah, it's significant, and it's growing. My view is we've got to do something with respect to trade, which is very similar to what I outlined that we did with the Scarborough Shoal Islands that we stood up and said, no more. China is clearly pushing ahead with their Made in China 2025. Made in China 2025 is a very strong Chinese focus on technologies and champion industries of the future. In China, you're just blown away by scale. China produces half the world's coal, half the world's steel, half the world's aluminum, half the world's energy consumption. They're going next stage, future. It's semiconductors. They're about close to $200 billion in semiconductor. What they do is R&D. It's buying American foreign companies, semiconductor companies. It's also erecting barriers to make it difficult for U.S. companies and European companies to do business in China. I mentioned this banking currency deal. We stood up to China then. It really got under my skin when they did that. Now it helped. I had to visit. I was in Silicon Valley just afterwards, meet all the icons, and it really got my blood boiling. Back to Washington, tried to light a fire into Washington, and they had all their irons in the fire. So I came back, and the China and Secretary Liu was visiting and raised all this. And afterwards, I thought he could have been tougher, stronger, Secretary Liu. So I walked up to the interlocutors, Premier Li Keqiang. It says, Mr. Premier, I don't think you get it. I've never seen American industry so exercised as over this. And you got to know that. He kind of looked at me. And I said, no, I don't think you really understand it. So I told him again. Subsequently, when Secretary Pritzker came over, and she raised the same subject, these banking guidelines that U.S. tech companies just could not live with. And Li Keqiang said, oh yeah, I know about that. Ambassador Baucus raised that with me last month, and he got emotional. And ambassadors usually don't get emotional. Well, it was a concerted effort. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce, along with the U.S. government, the U.S.-China Business Council, the European Chamber of Commerce, European Commission, Japan, South Korea, we all together, joined together, and said to China, you cannot do this. They backed down. It's the only time I can think of where China's really backed off of something they're really trying to do because they knew they couldn't proceed. We have to do things like that, but it's hard. It's really hard. It's hard in one respect because we don't have as much of a strategic plan as I think we should have. It's also hard because China's really smart. As I mentioned earlier, it's kind of divide and conquer. I'll mention one, I will not mention the name of this company. I was talking to them about this, and they said, oh, Max, you can't do that. We're going to put sanctions on China. You can't do that. Why? Get a boomerang and hit us, my company. It's a huge, big company. You all know about it. And, well, give me a break. What do we do then? Oh, I don't know. But you can't do that because it'll boomerang hit our company. Come on, give me a break. You thought all about this. There must be some backup plan where the industry can work better together. I couldn't get anything out of them. And I'm not being critical, but look at these guys. They're worried about their shareholders. They're worried about their quarterly reports. They got to do deals and so forth. It's a little bit dog eat dog with their competitors. And but we have to. The government has to get our American companies together in the same industry, whatever it is, and say, hey, we're in this together, guys. It's the old Ben Franklin thing. Either we hang together, or most assuredly we hang separately. And I think there's a lot of that going on here. Yeah. What else? Yeah.
Hey, I would like to thank Montana World Affairs Council for inviting students at the U to come and listen to this. I have a question pertaining to aspiring foreign service agents. What bit of advice do you have, the best bit of advice you have for people that want to get involved in foreign affairs and work and an ambassadorial position for the United States?
Yeah, foreign service is wonderful. And thank you for being interested. I'm so happy to hear that. Just work hard, study hard, take the foreign service exam, study for it. And once you get named, hey, it's great. They're very good jobs. It's kind of an elite group. They're smart, they're tough. It's a bit of a morale problem today in the State Department of the U.S. Foreign
Are there a lot of McDonald's in China? I'm lighting the air here a little bit. And if so, are they busy?
There are a lot, and they're very busy. They do well. Kentucky Fried Chicken, Starbucks, you bet. Yeah. Yes, you.
I have a question regarding North Korea again.
Sorry?
I have a question regarding North Korea again.
Microphone, yeah. Is there a mic?
I have a question
Yeah.
regarding North Korea
Yeah.
again. So China and the US are both permanent members of the UN Security Council, and I was wondering what the role of the Security Council is in this case.
They're helpful. China's been helpful. China tends to align with Russia. They check with the Russians, what are we going to do about this? And they're helpful. They've agreed to a lot of sanctions. They go a little farther, but they agreed to a lot. They've gone, just my judgment, just kind of far enough from their perspective. Yeah.
What do you mean when you say China needs us more than we need them?
That if for some reason the plug were pulled and there's no more trade with China, that would destabilize China so much. The party will do anything to avoid an unstable China. People lose jobs when people start to question the party leadership. Can we keep going on with this party or not? And I think that it's easier for us if the plug were pulled to work with other countries around the world. It'd be devastating to us too. But I think it would topple China more quickly than would it topple the United States government. Yeah.
Can you speak to the increase in investment by China on the African continent?
Yeah.
Are we being outmaneuvered?
Well, there's a lot of investment in China. We Americans are trying to as well. Up to about a year or two ago, China was very heavy-handed with African investment. They're sending Chinese workers over, building all this stuff, dictating to the host government what to do, not to do, and they got badly wrapped for that. And I remember the Premier Li Keqiang went over and trying a goodwill tour, trying to straighten things out a little bit. I don't have specific figures. I just know they're very active, and as is the United States, and they're aggressive. Part of it is to protect their commodities supply lines, so they can get the copper and all that kind of things for the country. But part of it is influence too. There's no question. And I hope, even though I said it's China's long-term plan, maybe 30 years to be either number one or close to number one, we got to work aggressively with China, and so that they kind of get off of that. It's going to be hard. I'm told by friends in China, there's a big debate going on in China. About half the Chinese powers that be want China to be number one at virtually any cost. Very strong nationalists. The other half said, no, we got to work with the United States and other countries. I'm told that's a debate that's ongoing down in China. And we, therefore, are in a position to try to influence that. And it takes a lot of work. We have to do what we can to influence it. What's going to happen tonight, maybe about 9:45 tonight, we're going to see what the lineup is for the standing committee for the new party, for the Communist Party. And I don't think it's going to be any big surprises. We're going to see that President Xi, because he's enshrined in the Constitution, it's going to have people on the standing committee who are kind of yes people. It's much different from earlier. Deng Xiaoping, when he was the big leader, he said very strongly publicly that the party should be divorced from the government, and there should be consensual rule in the party, not one-man rule. 'Cause that was after Mao. People hated Mao being the one man. So Deng kind of spread things out, but slowly it's all been changing back again. And so Xi Jinping is in more control. I think we'll know in 6 months from now what direction China's really going to go. Are they going to kind of reform a little bit here? Are they going to not? Are they going to be more expansionist foreign policy? Well, I think we'll know a little bit more in 6 months. Yeah. Did you? I asked you before, right? Oh, go ahead. Yeah. Yes.
Russia shares a border with North Korea. And why can't Russia help more to tamper down North Korea?
Well, I'm just giving my opinion. Putin likes power. Putin likes to be the big man in Russia and tries to be the big man on the block. Chinese look down their noses at Russia. And Putin also wants to work with North Korea. And a lot of North Korean, I think, employees, workers go in Russia and help work in Russian factories. I'm a little bit unclear about that.
50,000.
Okay, thank you. A bunch do. And so they're gonna, it's kind of ambivalent about all of this. Yes?
Hi, so you talked about the Thucydides trap and when rising powers confront each other and the likelihood of war, but then you also talked about how China needs us more than we need them. So like, what is the possibility of war between China and the US? And I guess coupled with that, like how would China withstand economic sanctions in war?
I don't think there'll be war. It just, neither wants it. China doesn't want it either. Be very unstable, be destabilizing in China. They don't want it. We don't want it. But in life, we got two choices: try or do nothing. And so we should try our best as a country to deal with this in a constructive way, to influence China the way that's constructive for us and for China. It's hard, but we have no choice. And I think America should devote more resources to Asia in the Foreign Service, in the government. Okay. Chinese people like Americans. We Americans issue 3 million tourist visas a year to Chinese coming visit the United States. They love it. It's Yellowstone Park, they go to Grand Canyon, and they love the open space. It's freedoms. They love it. TV, movies, all that. They love it. And so I just think that that's something we should work on, try to develop and so forth. That this is not a bad news story I'm mentioning tonight. It's rather just, I'm trying to be realistic, it's a challenge that we all face, and we have to be clear-eyed about it, because I just see China doing what it can. It'll go as far as it can until it's stopped. They're either going to be stopped internally, or they're going to be stopped externally, or both. And it's an exciting challenge, frankly. That's one reason I like the job so much. Just working on this relationship to try to figure out a way to make it work.
One of our board members would like to ask a question.
Sure.
A lot of pressure there, thank you. No, thank you so much for joining us here. We're really honored to have you. And I just kind of wanted to ask you a question about, I really agree with you about China's long-term strategic thinking, and they have the ability to do that within their government. And so how do we do that strategically in the US with our term limits, 2 years, 4 years? And so how do we as a government think long-term? And so people always used to say China's the sleeping giant. Well, I say now, we're the sleeping dodo. And so how do we get there?
Well, I've thought about this a little bit, and I really don't have any good answers. It's institutions in the U.S. That is non-governmental, in addition to governmental, but it's longer-term institutions with think longer term, whether it's Brookings or SAIS or Asia Foundation. I think this is a challenge that they've got to face, frontally, just deal with it. Because it helps a lot more if there's more consistency, more continuity, more staying power, so what we come up with is sustained, irrespective of, not totally irrespective, but somewhat irrespective of presidents which come and go. We're not going to change our Constitution in this regard. We are who we are, but and I think too that there are a lot of very bright people, State Department, a lot of very bright people in the State Department, as well as other departments thinking about China, and they just have to be empowered more, and given credit more. And if the president, whoever's president, we really give folks that kind of credit, make them feel good about themselves, because they care, man, they care. In all these other entities which I described, you have to do something like that. I don't have a silver bullet answer here, but I just think something like that. Charlie's got, okay.
This is an odd question. Is there a place in any way in the government at this time for your voice?
You're right, that's an odd question.
I'll answer that.
I don't know. As very thoughtful, but it's
Just with your history and your understanding and your sense, for that to be shared within appropriate areas, is there a possibility that can exist with whatever government is in at the time?
Well, I know one person who's not so sure about that. Thank you for the question. I do think about it a little bit. I think about writing some op-ed pieces and doing this and that a little bit. I also know those folks back there don't want a former to tell them what to do. I'm a senator. I know what's right. What's that former senator? What does he know? And that kind of thing. It's just a little bit of ego. You have to be very constructive in dealing with egos here, and so they're not put off.
That's why you're so good, Max.
Well, thank you. Oh, that's a good question. Okay. Yeah. Yes.
Is there an interest or a role to play for China in combating international terrorism?
Yeah. Yes, there is, but they're very concerned. All countries are concerned about their own self-interest. In China's case, it's basically Muslims in far western China, the province of Xinjiang, Uyghurs, and they're paranoid. China's paranoid about Uyghurs, with Turkestan developing some kind of insurgents that questions the Chinese government legitimacy, and they talk. And Xi Jinping's even gone all the way out to Xinjiang. It's a wonderful province, huge. Reminds me a bit of Montana. Mountains, snow, but peaks and so forth, and dry in certain parts. But they've talked to us about this. Working in the United States, we had this counterterrorism dialogue. We've had them every year. It's a little bit tricky because we don't want to, our definition of a terrorist is a bit different from theirs. We have a rule of law, it's evidence-based, and they don't care about that very much. And so it's a little tricky. We try to work together to develop some standards in how we compare information and technologies and so forth. It's a bit, it's in the early stages.
Ambassador, if I could. The ambassador's had a long day, and he's been very generous with his time tonight. I'd say we have time for 2 more questions.
I will go.
Right here, thank you.
Okay,
I'm
Kim.
probably the only Korean standing here, and I'm very proud to be American because my dad adopted me. He was in the Vietnam War, and he passed away a couple years ago. He didn't ever share anything about what happened in Vietnam until the very end. And he adopted 2 Asian kids because of his guilt and all the things that he had to go through. As you know, many Koreans and a lot of people like gifts, and I've not ever heard American offering their hands and saying, you know what, we want to send you a gift. And obviously the North leader is starving the people and giving the gift and saying, giving our hands, saying we're here to want to help you, and just giving the food, because obviously he's starving many thousands and millions of people. And who's going to turn down a gift? And I think, just throughout the whole world, even just, the powerful people that in the government, just, offering the gift of like, here's some food, and, we want to be peaceful, because everybody likes gifts. And I've studied that up about Koreans. They love gifts. And I don't know, I was raised here, but I think it's incredible to offer that of gift to North Korea, because it's the leaders that are not the greatest, but I believe that there's innocent people that are suffering because of it.
Well, the current president of South Korea, Moon, is more inclined to want to talk with Kim Jong-un than his predecessor. Her predecessor pursued something called the Sunshine Policy, where Korea would work with South Koreans would work as a joint facility on the border with North Koreans. It just did never get very far. The politics kind of got in the way, and I don't want to be too stark about this, but I think Kim, he doesn't want to be in a position of receiving gifts at this point. He wants to accomplish his #1 objective, and that's be a nuclear power. Only when that happens, when he thinks he's secure, when he thinks there will not be a regime change, neither China nor U.S. will try to topple him, then I think he might want to start talking. But until then, I'm just telling you my view. I think it's difficult. Yeah.
Why has the Chinese government tightened down on NGO rules and regulations?
It's really true. During the 3 years I was serving over there, you could just see it almost on a monthly basis, where the government would dramatically tighten up, beat down the hatches on the NGOs, especially foreign NGOs. It's got to the point where a lot of them just gave up the ghost. And the new rules, they had new NGO law. We got them to back off a little bit. At least we got them to publish it. I mean, this is how far things go. They're about to issue new NGO regulations. I said, no, at least publish it so the world can see what they might be. And we finally got them to do that. But nevertheless, you have to have an NGO in China has to have a government-sponsored co-partner, and that makes it very, very difficult for that NGO to pursue what it may otherwise want to pursue. However, they're very important. I remember talking to an environmental ministry who really did seem to want to do something about ivory poaching and all the ivory being sold in China. So now, your NGOs could help you here. And he agreed. There's a role for NGOs to help the government accomplish some of their, we think, legitimate objectives. But this is all part of party dominance. The party is now putting more and more people in place in lots of different institutions, NGOs, private companies, not state-owned enterprises, but private companies. And they're even to the point where they're asking for a 1% ownership of stock of a private company. And the party cells they're virtually everywhere. And don't forget, China is virtually all surveilled. Cameras, microphones. I mean, And that is very intimidating. The people know they're being surveilled, and they're therefore less inclined to, it's very stifling, less inclined to get caught out of hand here. And that's where you just see it every few months, tighten up even more and more and more. It's reached its apex right now with how much control Xi Jinping now has. And the party is everything. It is everything. Now, having said all that, I would say the Chinese, all these meetings I have with them, and I'd be kind of frank and candid, pointing all these things out. I would say, and I meant it, nobody in this room wants this relationship to work better than I. You may want it to work really well, U.S.-China, but nobody in this room wants it to work better than I. I say that constantly because I meant it. I want this to work. But I think to be work, you got to be honest in a constructive way. And that's what I would constantly try to do when I was over there.
Can I just ask one question about the young people of China? Where are they today? Are they so proud of the economy and because they're being given much more in your way of science and labs and all that, and go home? Are they accepting this firewall and information and all this, or is there a restiveness? I mean, how about the corruption? Is he controlled that enough? Because we always hear that they're discouraged about the corruption, they're discouraged about the unequal application of law and all these things, but where are they?
Well, that's a lot of questions.
I don't want to talk about that.
No, it's fine. No, it's interesting. It doesn't directly answer your question, but right over there, somebody said to me, and I try to corroborate this statistic and see what the accurate amount. 45% of the purchase of all luxury goods in the world are by Chinese. About 10-15% in China, and the rest by Chinese outside of China. There's a big tariff on luxury goods in China. So they go to the big fancy department stores. I mean, they're big and fancy. They're not buying stuff. They're looking. And they go overseas or online or something and get it and then bring it back in so they don't have to purchase it online. Purchase it in a department store. As I said, they like America. And I was talking to some American teachers over there about this maybe about a year ago. So what do your students think about all this? They don't care. They're like kids. A lot of them don't worry that they don't have access to the internet. VPNs, and get around it. They don't care that much. They don't care that much about all the the current events that we tend to care a lot about. They're kids. They're just doing their thing. Don't forget, what TV do they watch? They watch CCTV, Chinese television. And they read the Chinese newspapers. That's where they get most of the information. And hate to say it, like a lot of Americans don't care as much as I think they should. But anyway, so it's mixed. They seem to be, they're not too upset with the firewall, with some of this repression, because they keep their nose clean. They're just having fun as kids, and as kids want to have fun, and that's enough. That's a lot of it, frankly. Well, one little conversation that was pretty instructive. I like to just walk down the street and just talk to people. And when I first arrived over there, Mel and I are, I'll be very brief about this, found a table, 30-year-olds talking. I could tell they're pretty smart, so when I talk to them. And I've met with them constantly, 5, 6 times in the last 3 years. I call them my Shanghai Five. There are 5 people in Shanghai. I keep asking them, what about this? And I just saw them a couple of weeks ago. And that's kind of what they say. They will say this, which is kind of alarming. I would say, some people in China think America is on the decline. What do your friends think? What do you all think? Oh yeah, it's true. We all think America is on the decline. And they think, those who care about these things, see Donald Trump and they think we're even on a greater decline than otherwise would be the case. There's a little conversation, went to a city called Chongqing. I walked down the street at 8 o'clock at night, the cafe there, walked up, sat down, talked to these guys. One guy's a machine shop operator, about 40 years old. And someone from Taiwan just across the table. And a student was the third person. The fourth person was a lady who ran this little cafe. They were drinking beer and sweet and sour soup or something, I don't know. Anyway, I turned to this guy. What's the future of Taiwan? I asked him. Oh, it's ours. Well, when is it yours? Tomorrow? Next week? Next month? 10 years?